Alright, so back to this, just another black screen MLB video, right? I've uploaded two recent ones, only one of them's up now, but by the time you're seeing this, the second one should be uploaded, and it's, or not recent-ish. It's, the first one is, what if Gabriel quit, right? You know, basically kind of go over, you know, scenarios and, again, just the impacts of, like, you know, and effects of what if, you know, he quit being Hawkmoth, right? And kind of what that would entail. And again, just the time that would need to take place, mostly like mid to end of season 2, right? But beyond that, I also have a second video. It's not up yet, but if you're seeing this, by the time you're seeing this, it should be up. That one is, what if Gabriel is able to move on? And that, again, mostly goes over if he just never became Hawkmoth to begin with, right? But kind of also goes over, you know, kind of potential possible scenarios, assuming the Miraculous would still be, you know, in use, like, in effect. Or that the show would basically still exist, rather than just, oh, everyone lived happily ever after the end, right? So, and again, I made a black screen and video titled Make Interesting Characters, right? But a while back, I did make a video on, you know, like, basically one change to fix the show, right? And that's Gabriel being a sympathetic villain, you know, redeemable in the eyes of many, right? Again, you know, or being redeemable, right? As it's something where I comment that, you know, basically after season 3 he's no longer a redeemable or sympathetic villain in my eyes, right? You know, based on him letting Natalie use the Broken Peacock Miraculous, right? In season 2, and at least at the start of season 5, we get some of his most redeemable moments. But then, obviously, those are thrown away, right? You know, dude, I can't emphasize enough how terrible of a father he is and how bad of a person he is. I mean, realistically, the only way the show could continue to move forward is, funny enough, the way it ended in season 5, with the universe resetting, creating a new reality, and then him dying, right? Sacrificing himself for it, which doesn't make up for what he did, but it was the best thing to do at the time. But again, besides that, this is going to go into, okay, more, I don't know exactly what I'm going to title this. It'll be something along the lines of how to make the show more interesting, right? You know, or the show being more interesting there. But the big thing being, again, kind of, I'm not going to go over him being a sympathetic, but I'm going to go over kind of basically everything else. Funny enough, it's very similar to the what if Gabriel gave up versus if he was able to move on video, right? This one is kind of in tandem with him, again, no longer being a sympathetic villain, and then that being the one change that could, again, you know, make the show better, right? Or that could fix kind of a lot of the problems with the show. And I will say, so, funny enough, I don't have any of these uploaded yet, but I've played the Miraculous Ladybug video game, which is honestly, it's alright, you know, I'm going to be honest. Again, there's some more bigger questions about it that I won't get into here. But it is something to where it's like, you know, so I play, where was I going with this? Where the fuck was I going? I was going somewhere with this. But it's something where, again, you know, at the end of the day, right, you know, it's, yeah, where the fuck, I swear, I must have, like, amnesia or something. I was going somewhere with bringing up the game. Again, I don't know. Yeah, fuck, Jesus. Alright, but basically the point of this, again, we're going to go over, like, how kind of, just to make the show more interesting in general, right, and kind of other things that we could change, right, you know, besides just Gabriel being, you know, a sympathetic villain, right, and then these are some of the stuff that I theorized and anticipated. Oh, yeah, I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say, you know, so some kind of blatant and just, the show really does have some blatant, you know, and apparent flaws. Some of the biggest ones are the Miraculous just being a complete crush power. They're arguably worse than, like, the Force in Star Wars in terms of just doing whatever you want. Miraculous are completely crush power. It seems like in each season is a completely different aim and direction than the one before it. You know, it's something to where, and then specifically the main two characters aren't interesting, right? Gabriel and Marinette, right? They're really not interesting. I'm going to kind of get into that. And something to where, again, you know, one that, funny enough, I saw in a YouTube comment is that just, like, the world building is kind of lame. Like, it takes place in Paris, but it's like, it really doesn't, I mean, obviously I don't live in Paris, but it's just, the big thing is that it's completely empty, right? You know, it's the same locations, but it doesn't, you know, feel populated. It feels like freaking, like, not Nuketown, but like freaking Chernobyl and like COD. But again, you know, and then also just some blatant like plot and like lore inconsistencies. So the show has many issues, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't even think this is gonna seem like really like wild coming from me. I don't think the show is that bad, at least with how it did in season 5. Like, I feel like season 4 was like honestly the worst the show had reached, but then season 5 corrected for a lot of that. But again, besides the point. But the big thing in there where, and I'm gonna bring up the part about Marinette and Gabriel being interesting or non-interesting characters, is that they're really not that interesting characters, you know. I do think the show has some interesting characters. For example, you know, obviously I have a character tier list. I think Adrian's a very interesting character, you know. I think he should have been the well, I don't want to say he should have been the protagonist, because, you know, then it'd probably be just the inverse scenario, but I think he's far more interesting than Marinette. Natalie, obviously, interesting character, also my favorite character. Again, you know, I think the Luca Kagami are both very interesting characters and got some great character development on their ends. Again, a lot of, like, I do think, like, Alia's I wouldn't say Alia. I mean, she's just, like, your stereotypical supporting friend role, but it's something to where she doesn't necessarily get that, like, character development. She just stays consistent. She just, again, is close to Marinette and is like her like best friend, supporting friend there. Kind of like Nino in a sense. Like it's something to where they both fulfill similar roles for Marinette and Adrian, but obviously because Marinette's the main character and main protagonist, right? Ali's gonna have more importance. But I'd say, you know, her character isn't necessarily more interesting. It's not really that interesting. She's just kind of that main supporting friend character. Similar to, again, you know, Nino and Adrian. I'd say Chloe had the potential to have a more interesting character arc, but obviously, you know, she's gone now, so don't need to worry about her. Again, like Sabrina, same potential, but obviously just never really lived up to. I will say, though, that, and then the rest of the side characters, I will say, what would you call Lila, again, I think they had potential to make her character interesting, but they just never really expanded upon it. Like, she's doing all this scheming and maneuvering, but we still have no idea what's for. Like, if it's just to ruin Marinette's life, okay, you're just way too invested, but who knows what else it could be. Okay, I like what they did with Felix's character. I was at first adamant about giving him a redemption, but with the way they played it into, like, not only the overall aggressed family conflict, but also just the nature of himself and Adrian. I mean, that doesn't mean he's a good dude. Like, dude literally still pawned all the Miraculous to frickin' Gabriel and, like, dusted the entire Earth. But I do like the direction they went in with his character in terms of, like, okay, they actually gave him a purpose and, like, reason based on, like, the family history and drama. But it's something to where, you know, most of those characters on the stream, we're just, again, not just the characters, but also just, again, you know, stuff about the environment, the nature of, like, the show, right, you know, kind of how things work in the story and the plot, you know, besides the inconsistencies. But again, we're just, this video, I've already wasted enough time. We're just going to go into kind of some things, obviously excluding making Gabriel a better person, that could make the show interesting, right? So with that, we can get into it. So let's, besides Gabriel, because I already went over him, right? Just making him actually sympathetic and redeemable like he was in season 2, giving him much more, you know, kind of putting him in much more of a dilemma regarding his position just would make him more interesting, more potential there. But moving on to Marinette. I think the problem with Marinette as a character is we never really see her, you know, face doubt, right? And or make wrong, like, decisions. At least up until the end of season 4. Like, the most interesting part of her character, funny enough, happens when she fails, right? And the problem is that happens so infrequently, we really don't see it. I mean, it's something to where, at least for the bulk and majority of, let's say, season 1 through, again, up until pretty much the end of season 4, you know, it's something to where she's always the one in control, and it's always Chat Noir that's the one kind of going off. But again, we know why Chat Noir does it, and that's part of, again, you know, Adrian's character arc and why he does what he does. But Marinette, again, the problem is that there's no real flaw, right? At least, again, up until the end of season 4. You know, I'd say we see more of it in season 4 and 5, but because it takes so long to see that, it's like, again, you know, for the vast majority of the show, her character is just very, like, uninteresting. Like, I mean, it's like, I don't want to say a stand-in MC, but that's kind of what it feels like, honestly. You know, just the only thing being that it's a gender role, like, reversal, right? Again, like, if she was, like, a male, right, it's something to where it would literally be, like, your stereotypical, like, bland, like, you know, fill-in, like, stand-in, like, MC for, like, a show or whatnot, right? But again, it's only really interesting because of the role reversal. But again, or at least until season 4, where we actually kind of see the culmination of her failure, right? And then kind of what she does in season 5 to kind of make up and counteract that. But it is something there to where it's like, once we do, it actually makes her character somewhat interesting, especially when she, like, actually, like, in season 5, the finale, when she actually pleads and then fights and then subsequently pleads with Monarch. But up until that point, yeah, it's just not interesting. So the main thing for her character, right, and funny enough, I went over a lot of this stuff in, you know, other recent videos. Like, I'm pretty sure I made videos specifically on her character. But again, in terms of the overall show, probably the big thing, make it more of a learning curve for her being Ladybug. We see, again, you know, funny enough, in, what would you call it, Stoneheart, that she is adamant and, you know, originally, you know, struggles to adapt to being Ladybug. But once she does, she doesn't really go through any other challenges. Like, I feel like, again, the big thing there, and especially because she makes zero progress with Adrian, and I'm going to get into that to begin after this, right, is that it's like, really, you know, it's something to where it's like, I think the bigger thing there should be that she just needs to fail more, right? You know, obviously doesn't need to, like, lose to Hawkmoth, but she just needs to go through more conflict there, right? And then, again, you open potential for a character arc similar to, like, let's say Adrian, who's actually an interesting character, right? And kind of what he goes through and deals with, and then, again, you know, kind of learning to, like, adjust and adapt over the seasons. But that's the first thing, right? Now on to Adrian Marinette. I'm glad they finally fucking made it happen after 5 seasons, but it really did need to happen earlier. It was obvious it was the end goal. I mean, they introduced Luca and Kagami. Granted, not saying they should have been introduced, but they were like side, like, you know, partial, like, love interests, and then it became something where it's like, so is Adrian going to be the end goal or what? Because if not, it's basically a waste. And it was, but it's something to where it honestly should have happened much sooner. Like, I'd say, like, season 3. Like, I mean, at the end of season 2, she literally kisses, like, Adrian. Like, I think it should have happened in, okay, debatable, like, you know, debating on this. I think it should have happened in the season 2 finale. Like, okay, you get the kissing, which is cute and all, but I think it should have been, like, a genuine, like, you know, it should have been built up to where they actually confess and become, like, a thing in the season 2 finale. And that way, when you introduce Kagami and Luca, you know, it can be something to where they start out as good friends to Adrian and Marinette, but then, you know, they develop feelings for them. Maybe they don't realize they're in a relationship or something. And then you can use that as, like, again, conflict and actually make kind of spice up their relationship there and make it overall more interesting. Is, you know, it's something to where, okay, at season 5 we get it, right? You know, and especially once, you know, in like the middle of season 5, and then the rest of season 5 is just dealing with the fallout of that, right? But it's something there to where it's like, it should have just happened way sooner. Like, you know, it just took way too long, and it's like, you know, again, it's something to where now it's just going to be like a picture perfect relationship with like 0 issues whatsoever, and then it's like, all right, you know, that's not really that interesting. So big thing, Adrian should have been a lot sooner, and then you can have conflict going based off that, which would make, again, which could also play into their superhero lives, right? You know, as obviously they're intertwined, but not saying they should necessarily figure out who each other are or who they are, right? But it is something to where it's like, you know, because like specifically what can happen is Adrian can kind of move on from his superhero crush, right? You know, and that's also something where like Marinette can kind of learn, you know, to treat Adrian as like, you know, kind of rather than like stalk him and idolize him, treat him as like just a normal human being, right? But just, again, someone that she likes, right? So it is what it is. That's the R thing, right? Again, so that's the main R thing, you know, improve Marinette's character overall, and then Adrian should have happened a lot sooner, right? Another thing, and another big thing, and this is something I brought up in the season 6, you know, predictions, right? You don't need to akumatize a person every single episode, right? And this was a specific problem in seasons, I'd say like 1 through 3, you know, or mostly season 4 kind of goes off on its own. But season 1 through 3, it's a pretty consistent problem to where it's like, okay, season 3, it isn't as bad. But at the very least, season 1, 2, it's the same format to where it's like up until, Scarlet Month, right? It's like, all right, you akumatize, just one person each episode. Or, something happens, someone gets upset, Hawkmoth akumatizes them, they rampage, Ladybug Chat Noir beat them, and then, end of episode, right? I think, that kind of setup in that, what would you call it? I think that setup in that kind of cycle, it kind of, detrimentally impacts the show because you can't really develop any of the people who are akumatized unless unless you know them already, or again, it's a multiple time thing, right? It's something to where again, and then also it really detracts from a lot of like the social stuff that goes on because you're dedicating like half the time and half the episode spending towards digging down Akuma. It should have been honestly a much more sparing thing where it's like, all right, in season 1 I kind of cut some slack because season 1 had basically no story and plot, and it was again, something where it was really starting up the show. But season 2 and beyond, really, especially since they had planned on Scarlet Moth being the finale for season 2, they should have really held off on, it should have been like an every couple or few episodes thing, and then it should have really been like an episode long endeavor, right? So, rather than just kind of half the episodes. So, the big thing there is, again, I think that's something where you just allow for so much more potential and possibility if you just kind of, it's a quality over quantity thing, right? And then it ends up being something to where it's like, all right, then you can go into the more special stuff later on with like the amucks, the combination, right? Other more creative stuff that Gabriel does, right? And then stuff like that, so. Also, I will say though that if you do, again, make Gabriel sympathetic, right? You can cough a lot more of what would be considered like, I guess writing or like, plot like contrivances to where he loses to more so his sympathy, right? You could put him in dilemmas to where he questions kind of what he's doing rather than just the plot, working against him. But I feel like that's, like, and I'm going to basically order of like precedence or priority here. Things that I just think that can be done better. Like, again, those two characters specifically, Marinette and then the whole Adrian Marinette thing. And then just, again, more quality over quantity for Akumas. Like, decrease the amount, like, one every couple or few, and then you'll be good, right? I will say, though, kind of coming off of that, I do think it was I do think it was ultimately the right choice to give up a Guardian. Like, and funny enough, one of the things I predicted for season 3 is that Master Fu would end up no longer being the Guardian, that it'd be, I think that was the right move, right? I mean, I feel like, that's something where, okay, what it comes down to there is that it's, yeah, he kind of failed his purpose in season 2 when, again, he ends up healing like Tiki, introduces and reveals something to Marinette, especially when Chat Noir gets involved. But funny enough, I think debatably Adrian would have been a more interesting pick for Guardian, especially with kind of the fact that, Ladybug already, is the one that purifies them, right? It would have been much more interesting if, like, let's say, granted, she had also been the one giving them to the people, right? But then that also just lead into, like, that would be, like, something that she and, Adrian, or, like, Ladybug and Chat Noir could talk about, right? Who the previous, well, I mean, it's not even, they already knew, right? Because, again, they were all exposed at the season 3 finale, right? But again, kind of the big thing there is I feel like it would have avoided probably the biggest, like, issue with season 4 easily is that, Chat Noir just basically is an afterthought, right? And basically they need the season 4 finale to bring it back into relevance. Kind of the big thing with that is you could easily just end up completely avoiding that if you just gave him that instead, right? But that's kind of another thing, right? But now we're getting into more minute stuff. I definitely feel like, excluding sort of Gabriel being the sympathetic, actually like redeemable character. Again, biggest things there is improve Marinette's character standalone, right? Make Adrianette happen a lot sooner, and then decrease the number of Akumas, right? And that just, you allow for just way more potential, right? Then, again, more minor stuff like, this would be, that's more at like a show level. For like a season level, we can get into, okay, Chat Noir could actually become the Guardian, right? A big one is Chloe could actually be a redeemable villain. Like, don't know why they just completely threw her away, especially if, I mean, granted, I'm surprised. Yeah, Felix gained a redemption arc, but Chloe not is actually kind of crazy. But it is something to where Lila still existed, so I have no reason why they needed Chloe to, like, be the way she was. If anything, you know, Lila and Felix could have worked together. That would have made more sense, you know. And obviously they would, like, end up seemingly betraying each other in the end, at least since they each have their own personal goals. But, so make Chloe an actual, you know, redeemable villain, right? You know, I guess a big season 3 thing is, and it goes with Hawkmoth being a sympathetic villain, right, is, and I think it's more so the fallout and kind of impact it has on season 4. Like, Natalie using, in the effects from using the damaged Peacock Miraculous, I mean, obviously, because she's immediately just unable to walk, right? You know, we see that in basically season 4, and she's just bedridden. But we don't really see it impact her until the end of season 5, where she's literally dying. And that was going to be part of my big plot points in season 4 and 5, right? And kind of what forces, you know, Gabriel and Hawkmoth to, like, kind of, you know, like, forces his hand, rather than himself getting cataclysm. Does that, all right, Natalie, it should have been a much more, incremental thing. It should have been, like, it was literally just, like, she was fine, and then she was fucking dying, right? You know, it should have been, and that should have been much more of a plot point, and again, that goes in hand with him being a redeemable character there, right? Because he could have felt more remorse and then maybe feel more pressure, you know, to do something, as opposed to, like, let's say, his cataclysm. One thing I still feel like that we don't entirely understand, that I'm interested, but we don't have an explanation, is why Gabriel started working with Tsurugi. Like, it seemed to just come completely out of nowhere. Which I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. Again, I think it's very interesting. We just still need a reason why. And that, again, that's more of a season 5 related thing, right? So again, that's just, we really just need a reason for that. I'm saying that's a good example of making it interesting, right? But it is something where we do just need an explanation for that, right? Also in season 5, again, you know, we see the effects of, you know, I guess somewhat sympathetic, redeemable Gabriel until he just completely blows it. But one thing we do kind of, the whole Mershat thing, that was like, that lasted for like 2 episodes, that did not need to be a part. I mean, I felt like actually seeing the progression of, you know, Adrianette was like rather than it go complete 180, like that was, again, you know, they were actually righting their wrongs. Granted, you know, it happens at the end, but still, same deal, right? You know, but it's something that now we're getting onto more minor stuff and more kind of nitpicky, but I really do feel like the big ones were the ones I mentioned earlier. And it's something to where it's like, again, I think that's one of the biggest problems with it. And I guess another, and kind of, you know, kind of the culminating thing, and one thing that I could talk about, especially with what I mentioned earlier, it's not really related to any of the characters, but more so the show itself, right? And kind of just the overall, like, nature of the show, you know, kind of lore and plot and story, right? Is that I think the Miraculous, they need to have limits. They need to have boundaries, right? That you can work within. I feel like that's something that's, you know, and then potentially break those boundaries, right? You know, I'm not opposed to it, but they do needs to be some limits, which just aren't there. Like, for example, you know, it's something to where it's like, you know, the seemingly, there are very few limits set. One, you know, the main, you know, limit is that, oh, you know, you can only use your power for a certain amount of time until you're an adult or grown up, right? But that's also a completely arbitrary thing, because it just happens to Ladybug Chat Noir, like, in the middle of, like, an episode for seemingly zero reason. Another is that, oh, you know, if you make a wish, there'll be an equal and opposite, you know, or there must be some sort of sacrifice, right? Which is expanded upon in the finale. Other than that, I'm going to be honest, and then each Miraculous is a power, right? But other than that, there's really no limit to what they can do. And it's something to where it's like, I feel like there should have been way more limits and boundaries. There should have been limits and boundaries on, like, physical strength, at least in terms of, like, even if it's not, like, a hard thing, there should have at least showed, you know, some, like, rather than it just do whatever the plot's necessary, right? I mean, there should be some, like, limits to, like, okay, how we, like, see and perceive that in terms of, like, there needs to be some kind of limit, you know, for the strength of the Miraculous, right? That's the first thing. You know, that's probably the biggest thing, because there's literally like you don't see them like fatigued or like affected by any sort of physical altercation at all when using the Miraculous. It's just not, the only one is Natalie, and that's because it's a broken one, right? Literally the only one. Other than that, there is no like, you see no like impact of like any actual like physical like stress or like physical, you know, damage on the wielder. Like, literally none. So there needs to be some limit for kind of, you know, again, kind of the physicality, like, aspect of it, right? You know, the durability. You know, so that's the first thing, right? I feel like the second thing is, again, you know, the powers need to be way more balanced. I mean, I went over the power tier list. Again, time travel literally breaks the lore itself, right? I came up with an in-universe explanation as to why, you know, Alex didn't stop the wish. And honestly, it somewhat makes sense, but it is something where time travel still basically breaks, like, the entire, like, it breaks the lore of the show, basically. You know, so time travel, but then even so, there are other just completely busted powers and certain, like, you know, powers that just entirely trump others. So, like, for example, funny enough, another one is, you know, the snake one, right? Like, we literally see Luca use it. Gabriel Hawkmoth makes his wish, and then Luca uses it to go back, right? You know, to reset it, right? And then everything's good. He also uses it to learn both Ladybug and Cat Noir's identities, right? Not, you know, intentionally, right? But just inadvertently. And it's funny enough because we see, and this was a big question. I will give them props for how they showed, you know, how like Hawkmoth, how he uses it, you know, how it's something to where it's like, you know, why, like, we don't see him use it. It's because, you know, the Lucky Charm adapts regardless. You know, so, which again, funny enough, shows how overpowered the Ladybug one is, because it's basically synonymous with Fate itself. I mean, Marinette with just the Ladybug and Black Cat one was able to defeat Monarch with basically every other one. And even though he was dying at that point, he really didn't seem to be physically inhibited, right? So, again, so there's that, right? Yeah, so the other thing there, though, so, and then just, again, you know, because some of them, like, you know, what would you call it? Like, strong as fuck, right? Like, teleportation, voyage, right? Dude, you can literally show up anywhere. But then again, some of them, like, was it? It's the Rooster one, I'm glad they put limits on that one, too. That one had the potential to be extremely busted, but they put some limits on it, which is good for the show. But what's the one where you punch hard? It's not the, Bull one, or whichever the one that gives you, you know, invincibility, right? Which is really only useful against Cataclysm, funny enough. But what's the one that allows, there's one that allows you to punch really hard. I think that might, it's not the dragon one. It's, I don't remember, but that one is like unironically the worst. Like, you have powers that just, you can punch hard, and then others you can literally just teleport. Again, and then time travels, like, just the most egregious example, but it's something where just balance the powers out more, and I'd say just give them more limits. Like, part of the reason why Hawkmoth's Miraculous exists and why he's the main villain is because of what his allows him to do, you know, for just the narrative, like, of the show, right? You akumatize a victim, they fight him, you know, one step closer to finding and defeating Hawkmoth, right? And then obviously, you know, the Ladybug and Black Cat, right? You have creation, destruction, you know, creation, like, allows you to actually beat, you know, and deakumatize those villains, and then destruction is kind of the antithesis, right? But it allows you to destroy objects that will potentially house the Akuma, right? So, like, those two make sense, right? But, like, some of the others you really need, like, you know, they really need to be balanced out, and that's something to where it's like, again, you know, funny enough, I will say what I do find kind of funny. You know, you'd think other Miraculous would play more of a part into the show, but they rarely do, which kind of sucks. Like, I would have loved to see, like, a lot more. I mean, you kind of get that in Season 5 with, you know, the nature of the Alliance rings and transferring powers. But, again, still, it's something to where you don't really see. Like, anytime Gabriel goes out and fight, you know, he uses the same, you know, ones, right? He'll use freaking, you know, the invulnerability one. He'll use the shelter one. He'll use the venom one, right? He'll use the division one. He'll use, like, he'll create a power of invisibility. Like, it's basically this. Granted, you know, it's very optimal, but it's something to where I wish we could have seen more out of the other ones. I mean, we kind of get them in earlier seasons with the other heroes, but I wish we saw more of them from the other end, right? And again, you kind of get that in season 5, but it's also something to where, again, you know, and I do think that's more so just due to the nature of the powers being so unbalanced, but, like, again, you know, just interesting there, because I'm pretty sure there are some we just blatantly never see. You know, we see him kind of go all out in the first few episodes, and then he gets humbled, and then, you know, he reforges them into the rings, right? Which I will say I do like. And in terms of the evolution of Miraculous, right? Okay, so first we see Ladybug, Cat Noir get like new forms in season 2. However, that's something that's never really expanded upon, unfortunately. We see the beginnings of Miraculous fusion in season 3 in the finale, right? You know, we see kind of the beginnings of that and the effects of that, right? But then again, you know, and Chloe about to go all out, but then, you know, the new guardianship transfer happens. Season 4, again, we see Hawkmoth really kind of going at it with both of his powers, right? But again, you know, it's something to where it's like, yeah, we like, I guess kind of the big evolution at that point is, again, you know, is just that, yeah, you know, Marinette's guardian now, so she can just pick who she wants. Season 5, like, is really the only point where we see, like, again, all of a sudden, just like that, you know, Marinette and Adrian are able to use their powers indefinitely, and then Hawkmoth also literally goes out of his, I mean, he repaired the Peacock one, right? But he goes out of his way and literally, like, reforges, like, which some people were against that. Honestly, I'm for that. Like, I wanted to see kind of, like, more of that stuff. And again, the more limits and boundaries you set on the Miraculous, right, you know, the more kind of you can grow and expand upon that with that kind of stuff. But again, with that, you know, I think I'm going to end it. I talked about pretty much everything else I want to regarding that. So that's all I've got for this one. That's it for this one. See you in the next one.